Hello and welcome to the Undercut Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Thiemo Daily, and joining me to recount all the action from across the feeder series seasons is, of course, Jesse Billington. How are you?
Not doing too bad. It's a pleasant evening. You and I have just spent a little while, about an hour, recanting the Formula One season from 2023. But I'm ready to enjoy something a bit more exciting, which is, of course, the feeder series seasons from the year gone. So, looking forward to something a bit more exciting in that regard.
Yes, quite the contrast. But before we get into the feeder series themselves, though, in terms of looking back on 2023, we do have a few bits of post-season news to dive into. So we're going to get straight into it. And Jesse, there is news from the world of Superformula.
Yes, my fun little world of Superformula, where Theo Pourchaire is going to be cropping up next season. Obviously, winner of this year's Formula 2 championship. And
addition to not make it into F1 immediately.
Yes, it was that or standing next to the Alpha Tauri sort of pit wall wearing a Alfa Romeo t-shirt and set of headphones. So he's opted not to do that and has instead found himself a seat in Superformula, where he'll be competing against Kamui Kobayashi, yes, that Kamui Kobayashi, and Ayumu Iwasa. So of course, both the Iwasa and Porsche moving from Formula 2. We've obviously got someone from this year's championship, the championship winner, moving to, I think it was Ritomo Miyata, moving from Superformula to Formula 2. Iwasa will be running for Team Mugen with a Honda engine, the same as Lawson, which makes sense because of the Red Bull Honda link. And Porsche, meanwhile, will be running a Toyota engine for the Itochu Inex team. Itochu came fifth last season while Mugen won. So some interesting teams they're moving to, and it'll be interesting to see how well they perform. But of course, Superformula is a very good season in its own right and is fast becoming this sort of fantastic, not necessarily bridging point, but sort of just season to entertain yourself in before a Formula One team eventually offers you something in F1. So, it'd be good to see what Porsche is able to perform like there, especially against the very hot content and talent that it seems to provide.
Yeah, it's a very good series, very competitive, and I think the only annoying thing is that it's another championship to watch, and it's probably going to fall again into the same category that Indy Next fell into for me this year. Is that not that I didn't watch it before, it was just I would kind of more dip in and out. But now that there's a couple of drivers where you've got a bit of skin in the game in the same way that JB Chadwick's Indy Next, so I care now what happens there. I'll probably be watching the highlights for the races, if nothing else. If I've got time to watch a full race, I'll happily do it. But considering the vast plethora of other motorsport that consumes us for the rest of the year, it's going to be tricky to fit it all in. But it's definitely going to be something I keep an eye on. And if I can enjoy it for 5 minutes in a highlight reel, then that is what I will do. And that is how I enjoyed Indy Next this year. And it was a very delightful 5 minutes every once in a while. So nothing bad against that.
Worth also bearing in mind, of course, Superformula in Japan, you've got the time zone difference to factor in. I think you want to be getting up at 5 a.m. every weekend it's on to sort of battle.
No offense to the drivers, then not even Kobayashi will get me up at that time in the morning. It's going to take a different driver altogether to get me into getting up at that time consistently just to watch a category that I wouldn't normally watch.
Yes. Mind you, speaking of drivers moving to new classes or certainly moving around within classes, we'll take a look at Formula 2, where there's been the usual silly season of feeder series there.
Quite a bit of news there, yes, which there's not many seats left, actually. And this is kind of a mix of new news and a reminder of old news, because as is the case, we record an episode and then a lot more news comes out immediately afterwards, and then we're ending up having to just wait until we record another episode, because otherwise we'll just be in a perpetual loop over and over. But Invicta Virtuosi have signed Gabriele Bortoleto and Christian Maini for next year. So this year's Formula 3 champion is going to be partnered with one of the surprise talents from Formula 2 for this year. So that's going to be very interesting to see what happens there. Hadjar and Pepe Marti joined Campus. Roden Carlin signed Zane Maloney and Miyata, previously, as you were saying, it from Superformula. High Tech have signed Paul Aron and, I guess, for some reason, Cordeal. Enzo Fittipaldi moves to VAR, and Jack Crawford has moved to Dams. And then this is also a reminder that Dennis Hauger and Frank Colapinto will race for MP Motorsport. Zach O'Sullivan will race for ART. Kimi Antonelli for Prema. And a curious signing of Paraguayan driver Dirksen for PHM, which means that at the time of recording, we have 7 seats left on the Formula 2 grid. And the important question is, who would you like to see?
Ooh. I mean, no word on what
Considering as well that you
to.
can just plug people from obscurity, as
Yeah,
we've seen with a couple of these choices.
yeah, Joshua Dirksen for one.
Yes.
No word on what Fred Vestey's doing. I don't think he'll be coming
I
back.
don't think he's coming back, though.
No, it's unlikely he'll come back. And certainly not. Well, who did he race for? He raced for Prema, didn't he?
Prema.
So it's unlikely
and they're sorted there.
Yeah. Well, no, they've got Antonelli and
they've got a seat open.
They've got seats still
I was
open.
thinking Formula 3.
ART have a seat open if he really wanted to go there. Dams, I don't think he'd bother going to Dams. I don't think they're going to be quite good enough to get in there. Neither VAR.
It's also going to be interesting to see where Arthur Leclerc fits in because I can't see him not coming back.
Yes, although he is rumoured to possibly be going to LMGT3 with Ferrari, so we'll see what happens there. But he might be able to juggle WEC calendar alongside F2. We'll see how that one pans out. I'd like to see perhaps a W Series name return. Maybe a Chadwick would be interesting, but I think she's committed to another campaign at Indy Lights.
Yeah, keep her in Indy. I think. Who from W Series then would you go for? Because again, we're thinking of, as much as we'd like to see a driver there, we want to make sure that they possibly have a chance of getting into F1. You know, it's this sort of thing. It's kind of, I want to say Tatiana Calderon as a non-W Series person, just because she's got history there. It'd be nice to see if you gave her a half-decent car what she could do. In the same way that for arguments I will make later, very convincingly, Sophia Fleur should get the second seat at PHM. But again, for W Series wise, it's interesting. Because everyone from there has kind of gone off to do their own thing in a way. And Sarah Moore is perhaps the only obvious contender, I suppose.
Yeah, Marta Garcia is now obviously going to be Frecker with Prema.
Fabian's off doing endurance racing. Vicky's doing endurance racing. Iris Rokova still can't do anything because of Russia, and which is a shame because she would have been very excited to see in Formula 2 from a performance standpoint. Alice Powell's coaching Abby Pulling. Abby Pulling's not going to be in Formula 2 because she's going to be in F1 Academy
and Formula.
So, yeah. So
which we'll get to in
just Hawkins.
Busy coaching at Aston Martin. The only real option is like Nerea Marti or Belen Garcia.
But that's then ridiculous. Belen because she's in endurance racing, but Nerea would be ridiculous just for the sake of here's a driver who is very good, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying she doesn't necessarily deserve a shot. However, she'd be jumping above the top 3 in her category in that year and going over Formula 3 straight into Formula 2, which would just be mental.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting one. That's sort of looking at the 2022 season. Was 2021 offer us any better options? Not really. Fabian Vorwen, Sarah Moore. Yeah, it's slim pickings really from that bunch of drivers. Oh, it's hard to say who I'd like to see in F2 then in that regard. Perhaps might have to start sort of fishing around from the F3 pool. Like you said, maybe now is the time to move up someone from F3 just to see what they can do, see what that performance margin is if you're not the F3 champion.
Talking of F3 though, because I don't think I'm going to solve that particular conundrum today, we do have some driver news from there as well. And Campos have revealed their 2024 Formula 3 lineup. So they've got Mary Boyer moving over there, Sebastian Montoya is switching to them from High Tech, and Oliver Goeth is staying with them for a second season. Kramer, meanwhile, are keeping Beganovic, and they've also signed Gabrielle Mini and Arvid Lindblad, so that's going to be interesting. I think Lindblad has some connection with Red Bull, or at least he did in the past. I'm not sure if they're still going because they seem to be chopping people left, right, and centre at the moment. Trident have signed Fawn Rowley. Browning, the recent Macau Grand Prix winner, stays at High Tech, along with newbie Martinius Stenshorn, which is easy for me to say. And Lawrence Van Hoppen joins ART Grand Prix, and BAR signed Noel Leon, who is the reigning Euro Formula Open champion. Which obviously does leave quite a few seats open, but I feel like you've got something you wanted to say there.
Yeah, I've got something to say here, mostly about Noel Leon. Why the hell is his name like palindrome? Who names their kid a palindrome? Like, why is his name the same field as it is
I'm
backwards?
guessing he's French
Noel Leon is a very French name, certainly, but like, it just
because
seems
then that would answer your question. There's also that's got to be.
he's not. He's Mexican. Or he has it certainly.
Well, now I'm very
sort of-
surprised.
Noel Jesus Leon Vasquez is a Mexican racing driver. So that implies that at some point Noel Leon is his picked name or like his chosen name.
In which case, someone's got to be trolling someone.
Yeah, in which case, more kudos to him for picking the palindrome name. But yeah, lots of seats open in F3 at the moment. But obviously, a few
Which is where I'd
drivers.
happily put a lot of F1 Academy drivers instead and just get rid of Frecker. Just like, go here instead. Come on, guys.
Yeah, but
Sophia can't do it all by herself. I know it's still good, but at the same time, it's just annoying that we have to go left field rather than up.
Yeah, it's a bit left field. I think it's also relatively mainstream. It's getting more and more mainstream. It's still sort of, it doesn't compete on the
just from an
weekends,
optics point of view, it's like F1 Academy to F3 to F2 to F1, not F1 Academy to, that's not on your list.
Yeah, it sort of doesn't fit with the F thing, and it's just a bit weird. Yeah, I think it makes sense overall. I think as that process sort of gets better and smoother, we're going to see it happen a bit more fluidly. Yeah, it's going to come over time, but there's a lot of seats still open. I think Trident obviously did pretty well this year in F3, so they sort of stand quite highly on the list. They've still got 2 seats open. I'm expecting a bit more from the likes of ART and Roden Carlin in F3 next year, so maybe they'll fish out some decent drivers from somewhere, but...
And I hope that we retain a few of them as well, because I think that was the problem I had with Formula 3 this year was that we spent a lot of the time trying to just figure out and remember who everyone was, because there was just such an influx of new people, because so many of them graduated into F2 from last year's crop. And by the time we figured out who people were, we were still trying to figure out who Bortoleto was. And it was like, how the hell is he leaving the championship? Oh, it's done. Oh, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
There was a lot of sort of new faces appearing into it, and equally some new faces appearing throughout the season. Like you look at the second seat at Roden Carlin, where you sort of started out with Hunter Yaney, then you had Max Esterson, and then at the end of the season, you sort of banged in a Francesco Simonazzi just to see what happens. Like they were chopping and changing drivers all over the gaff. Again, the same with Piotr Wisnicki, which we then stuck in Mackenzie Cresswell, and then Michael Shin for the final few rounds at Charus. And you're like, we just have a bit of consistency. I'm still trying to figure out who the hell Paul Aron is and why the hell all of a sudden
why is everyone so excited about him? Yeah.
Yeah. And the fact that he's not in he's not signed in F3 next year, is he?
Paul Aron? No, because he's in F2.
Ah, that's why, yeah. Like all of a sudden he sort of appeared, did well, and has then immediately graduated. So yeah, it's interesting. It's trying to keep a track of everything, but we'll see how it pans out.
F1 Academy is a bit easier to keep track of, and in news that shocked absolutely no one, Abby Pulling signed back up with Carlin for 2024 in both F1 Academy and British F4, still with Alpine backing. And I'm not saying she shouldn't have, because I can see why, but I think it was just my optimism getting ahead of reality slightly in terms of it was frustrating that we saw her there in the first place because we thought she could get into F3 if anyone was going to from the W Series crop with how impressive she'd been there. So to see her back for a second season was a little bit annoying because also then the Alpine team can't back a different driver, which would have made sense for Lola Lobenfoss, for example, because you've got a French driver with a French team in F1 backing her. But ruin all of my ideas, why don't you? But it's going to be nice to see, and hopefully she can have a better year of it in 2024, because I think weirdly, she underperformed this year, despite having some touches of goodness. She didn't win a race, whereas others below her in the championship did. And that was curious. And we'll get to that later. But
before we move off Abby Pulling, I want to question why she's also signing for British F4. Because is F1 Academy not enough that you've also got to go and do another series at the same time just to prove your mettle? The only thing I can
think of there is, it's not necessarily proving mettle, but it's just more seat time. And if you've got the money, go and do it, and it's good practice. It's good. It's a way to hone your racecraft and potentially gives you an advantage over everyone else in the season. Because I think F1 Academy next year, with the F1 teams coming in and backing a lot of drivers, they're going to throw a lot of spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks. in ways that they may not do as much in later years, just to show that they're making a big song and dance about it. So Abby might need to be more on her toes than she would have been this year, or if the F1 teams weren't going to be a part of it. So she doesn't want to necessarily get caught out. So maybe that's why she's in British F4. And even if she doesn't do brilliantly there, it may be just about make your mistakes, try things there, because ultimately it doesn't matter as much. You want to make the big moves and get the big results on the global stage with F1 Academy.
Okay, I wanted to sort of open that one up by sort of playing a bit of devil's advocate with that one and just sort of seeing what the thought was and just sort of putting out why she might be looking at this alternate series as well. The other F1 Academy news, of course, Bianca Bustamante will be representing McLaren and driving for ART, while Tina Houseman will be representing Aston Martin, driving for Prema, and Leah Block is signed on with Williams and also racing for ART. So how does that look for their entire championship? There is a lot of seats still open, 16 seats, and we've only filled a quarter of them. So plenty still to come.
And arguably 3 of the top 3 not coming back.
Very much seems to be the case, yes. Obviously, scrolls down to results. Garcia, obviously, off with Frecker. Lena Bula, what's she up to this year? Or 2024, rather?
The only thing I'm thinking there is the top 3 have an invitation to join Frecker. So whilst Garcia is obviously going there, second and third have the option too because of the arrangement they have with Frecker. So I would like that to be taken up. And by extension, I don't think Bula could come back anyway because she'd age out. And same for Carrie Schreiner. She's in that bubble where she would age out partway through the season. So whether or not she comes back is going to be interesting to see. Because do they sign her up and just let her get away with it, or do they kick her out halfway through the season?
We'll have to wait and see where that one pans out and what they opt to do with their 2024 seasons. I think it'd be great to see Hamda stick around for another season, while that, or perhaps make that move to Frecker and again get a chance to sort of show her power against Marta Garcia and sort of produce something there. And
I think the last key point to make with it is though as well is that all the drivers are only able to do 2 years in F1 Academy. And while they don't have to be taken consecutively, maybe that's why we don't see a few of the drivers from this year back next year. Maybe they're going to try and be strategic about it and think, right, let's go and not necessarily practice somewhere else, but maybe do what Abby Pulling's doing in some ways and go, right, let's hone the racecraft and then make sure that I can give F1 Academy my all, because that is where the massive opportunities lie. And potentially then, if you're doing it for 25, you're looking for something for 26, it's like we were saying just now, maybe you don't go to Frecker, then maybe you will be able to get up to F3 and it's worth it in the long run. And also this may go out the window completely and all of them come back and it's very different seats and it all goes out the window. But there may be a strategic element there that's worth thinking about.
Yeah, I think definitely sort of combining that F4 in there, because the F4 is more likely to be a step up into F3 than potentially sort of just gambling on F1 Academy being that step up to F3 where it has that sort of more massage.
Especially when it's such a tight championship as well. I mean, you look at this year, we'll get to in a bit, where every driver scored points. A lot of the drivers on the podiums, a lot of different race winners, and you look at practice times, you look at qualifying times. There's such slim margins from first to last that if you're just casually looking at results, you could easily dismiss a handful of drivers for no real reason just because you see a number next to them and you think, oh, well, they've done badly. Then it's like, no, it's just really, really competitive.
I mean, everyone as far down as 11th had a podium at some point. Obviously, Carrie Schreiner came in 11th, but obviously had a win in the second race at Zandvoort. So it's able to produce some really interesting races and a good field spread in that regard. But yeah, even the points when you look at like the top 3, 278, 222, 207, it's a big enough point spread, but you're going to bear in mind that they're running 3 races across a weekend. So they're really shoehorning in a lot of races to these. And Marta Garcia very much sort of almost deserved to try and run away with the season. But Lena Bula and Hamda Al-Khabaisi kept her honest as the season went by. So it's an interesting one to sort of look back on, and I'm sure we'll get back to it in a moment in time. But we'll jump into Formula 2 and the season review, Thiemo.
Yes, because it was a good enough season by F2 standards. It was Yeah, it was a good enough season, I think, because I think we're always treated by Formula 2, and we were treated in a slightly different way this year because it was make or break for the two championship contenders, really, in what can they do, and is this going to be a really defining moment of both of their careers? And that's obviously the focus on Theo Pourchaire and Frederick Vesti, with the former securing the title. And like you say, even if you get the title, you're not going into Formula One straight away anyway, and we don't know where Vesti's ending up, so it's kind of well, to be confirmed how defining this is in terms of their careers, but it was entertaining to watch all year regardless. And we had 11 different race winners in 2023, which is mouth-watering when you look at Formula One. Pourchaire and Vesti, obviously, Doohan, Iwasa, Martins, who is the highest placed rookie this year, very, very solid drive from him. We'll just put Monaco in that instance aside. Oliver Behrman, Fittipaldi, Hauger, Verschoor, Boschung finally, and curiously enough, in Zandvoort, Simon Oberlek, with fun fact, he only had one other point scoring race aside from his race win. So he really had a most unusual season.
Yeah, very unusual season for Novalak, and I think possibly the reason why we won't be seeing him back in Formula 2 next season.
Yeah. 5 drivers didn't score any points, including the infamous Roy Nissany. Cordial was just ahead of Nissany on 8 points in his second full season, down from 26, though, in his first season. And somehow this has meant he's got a contract for 2024. I smell money, but that's not too surprising. 20 out of the 25 drivers that competed this year scored points, which makes PHM's total points tally of 0 very, very impressive.
Yeah. Impressive.
In the wrong way.
Yeah, you're not
like it's not what you want to be known for.
It.
It's incredible how you've managed to achieve that, considering just everything. So that's just a fun point. But I'm going to talk about that later. ART were up against the Premier in the constructors, with the former winning with 353 points to 322, and it did go down to the wire. So that was always good fun as well. You kind of half forget about the constructors in Formula 2, I think, because you're just so focused on the drivers and what that could mean for them and their future. But it's nice that we got a proper constructors battle there as well. But all of that is kind of a very brief summation of the season, and to kind of round out the best of it, or round out the rest of it rather, who was your driver of the season?
My driver of the season, I think, has to be, again, much like I did in the F1 pick, I'm going for the champion, and I'm going for Theo Pourchaire. But
There's going to be a pattern forming here.
There is a bit of a pattern forming here, but hear me out. He did not have a lot of wins this season. He won this season off of consistency and just putting in the grind, turning up each weekend and making the most of it. Luck was rarely on his side. Even when it came to things like FP1 sessions over in Formula 1, luck was not shining down on this kid. So to be able to really pull this one out of the bag and just drive with the level-headedness that just keeps you on the boil each weekend, I think is really quite astounding. And doing that in the very frenetic world of F2, more so than anything, proves that there is a very sensible head in that guy. And if he does not make it to Formula 1, there is a very good endurance racer in there, someone that can just keep on it and keep on it and keep on it for such long periods of time. That is a driver and a half right there.
Yeah, it very much created a curious advertisement for Formula 2 where, the champion this year, how many races did he win? 1. Wait, what? Yes, and but second place didn't win any, right? No, he won 6. I'm like, interesting. And it does kind of demonstrate why it was such an interesting season to watch in some respects, especially between two seasoned drivers for the category that they're in, because you've got not necessarily lack of strategy on one side, but you've got more going for it, and then you've got the more reserved side of things, and that ultimately did win, which is not always the guarantee, but it's interesting to see how close that could have been. And it wasn't that Vesti's strategy didn't work, it's just he had more bad luck in F2, it felt like, with his DNFs, with his non-point scoring. You're thinking Silverstone, Spa and Monza as the key moments that led to his downfall for the end of the season. But he did put in a very impressive drive in Abu Dhabi and made sure that Pourchaire would have to work for it a bit at least come the season finale.
Yeah, Vesti kept Pourchaire honest the entire way, and I think his almost perceived dominance really put pound to that. And yeah, at the end of the day, if you're able to come away as the champion, that's not to be sniffed at, and it's not like he did a Verstappen and romped away with this one. He had
No,
to fight for it tooth and claw at every turn. So yeah, for me, driver of the season, it might seem a little sort of cliche or pash, but yeah, I'm standing by it.
I've gone for Jack Doohan though, and that's just because whilst he might not have had the most stellar season, I may not have even put him on this if he hadn't somehow clinched third in the drivers' standings right at the very end from Iwasa, who we would pretty much thought had that in the bag and didn't think it was possible to lose. We didn't even we looked at it and thought, yeah, it's possible, but it's not going to happen. And I think Doohan, he just had such a tumultuous first half. He was everyone's favourite for the championship coming into it before the season began. And then for him to just flounder essentially was just gut wrenching. But then he somehow managed to turn it around after the summer break ish area, that kind of those races that you'd associate with it. And just absolutely clawed it back. And I think you deserve credit for that. And I think as well, it brings up that argument that we're not going to have again this time, but or a discussion rather of does a good driver deserve to get an F1, or do you have to be a great driver, or can a good driver become great in F1 if you give them a chance? And Jack Doohan's flirting with all these different elements of that, but I think getting P3 there is going to be interesting to see if he comes back next year, and if he doesn't, where he goes, because you want him to be an F1, and you just think he just needs a little bit extra for now. And I think he's a bit underrated in that notion, which is a perfect segue really into the next category for reviewing the Formula 2 season.
Before we shuffle off too quickly, I think with Doohan, he's a very interesting driver, and the fact that he was able to sort of again do very much what Pourchaire did, which was have quite an underrated season on a scorecard, but one that in summation was actually quite brilliant, is really sort of testament to I think why you've picked him for driver of the season, and definitely worth it. I think equally it'd be great to see him make that F1 step eventually. Alpine are really attached to him, and he does a lot of work on their sort of junior side of things. I think they've got a bit of a battle on their hands as whether they go for him or Victor Martins, which way that goes. But
it would be equally amusing if he's as attached to them as he is, and McLaren poked him as well, considering where he's from.
Yeah, we'll wait and see what happens there. But he's
Doohan and Piastri, McLaren 2026. There we go.
Two Australian drivers with a team of Kiwi origin is quite perfect. It's like the ultimate oceanic sort of outfit. But equally, he could sort of be a generational John Surtees, in the fact that John Surtees transitioned from racing motorcycles to racing in Formula One, and of course Jack Doohan's dad, Formula MotoGP world champion. We'd sort of have a bit of a generational split in it, but it'd be nice to see that happen again. I think
there's a lot of potential there, which is why I think it's exciting to keep an eye on him.
It's a good pick, and I 100% agree with you on that one.
As underrated as he is, though, we do have two other choices for our underrated driver of the season. And we mentioned him briefly for the fun statistics that he has associated with him. And you're going to keep the spotlight on him for a moment longer before he fades into whatever background he's going to fade into.
Yeah, I just like me a Clement Novalak. Okay, he's fun, he's exciting, he's a little bit different.
Have and buy yourself one.
Treat
yourself for Christmas.
A Clement Novalak is not just for Christmas. There's something about his character that's quite roguish and very much of the sort of 1970s Formula One driver, and I quite like that. He's not particularly good on track, or certainly his season this year hasn't proven otherwise. And even last year's season, where he was against the champion in the best team, didn't really shine there either. Yeah, so it's tricky to speak highly of Clement Novalak, but his race in Zandvoort, as much as it's easy to say it was handed to him, he did have to do a lot of management and a lot of work to stay on the pace and get that win, and
not crash,
because it was tricky conditions. So it's worth giving him credit where it's due, and it is a small amount of credit in a very small window of dueness, but there we go. For me, it's Clement Novalak.
For me, it's Richard Verschoor and his win in Austria. just because you wind the clock back to 2022 and he won the race there and then got disqualified because of a fuel infringement. And it was painful for everyone. So for him to be able to come back a year later, win, and keep it, everybody liked that. And I feel like it doesn't get as much attention as it should do because, again, he's one of these drivers where he's around a lot, but we don't necessarily know where he's going to end up in the future. So I think, again, like with your driver, credit where it's due because we don't know when we're necessarily going to be able to give it to you again. And that's not necessarily down to anything you've done in this instance.
Yeah, it's Richard Verschoor is a very, very good driver, but just nothing seems to come of it at times. You see these fantastic drives, these brilliant quali laps, and it just comes
kind
to
of reminds
nothing.
me of Bottas in some ways.
Yes, yeah, he's very Bottas. And if there was an F1 team looking for a Bottas right now, you couldn't do.
And you didn't want Bottas.
You didn't want
Here's
Bottas.
a younger version.
Or weren't able to get Bottas. I don't think you could do too far wrong with potentially looking at a Verschoor. I don't even think he's done an FP1 session for anyone either. So it's quite the long shot in that regard.
Associated with anyone.
No, he's very much sort of a lone star in F2, which is quite odd, but strange, yeah. And very much sort of the Drugovich of this era, but yeah, it's odd.
Am I guessing that you've chosen this choice for round of the season because of the previous category we've been talking about?
No, more for the fact that it was quite sort of fundamental in the way the season panned out, and the fact that it kept the championship fight at the top burning for that little bit longer. It looked like it was going one way, then the other, with both drivers crashing out, one then the other. I can't remember who went first, but then all of a sudden the camera pans around and there's Vesti with no rear wheels on his car. It was, as much as it was nice to see Clement Novalak winning a race, to watch a round of the championship go that haywire, and to think how important and relevant that's going to be to how it pans out overall, it's quite fun.
I chose Baku for the same chaotic nature of it because whilst you've got some brilliant close field wheel racing that you'd expect from Formula 2 at the best of times, case in point being Bem and Vesti in the same part of the grid where we saw Alonso and Sainz doing battle in the Grand Prix, you also had that humongously silly car pileup. I think that was this year, wasn't it? Going into turn one. And was that this year?
Was it? Maybe.
Yeah.
Quick
check so we can edit around this. I can still save it if it's not, but I feel like that was this year.
I left my tab on F1 Academy 2023, Formula 1, Formula 2. What round are we talking about? Azerbaijan. The race was interrupted by two safety car periods as Ralph Boschung and Roy Nissany were involved in separate incidents as racing resumed with 3 laps remaining. 6 drivers failed to make the first corner, either hitting the wall or running wide and stopping. Yes, I remember this because there was like one guy stuck in a wall and a guy swung around.
Well, so I was thinking, I feel like it happened the year before as well because that was with the Turkish video game excuse of a driver that I can't remember the name of, who then his dad started a fight in the paddock later on. And I thought that was for the same reasons. But it just looks like people in F2 can't get around the first corner.
What was his name? Cembolet Bassi.
That's the one. Because he was in Superformula this year for a bit.
But he was he?
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
Again, checks notes. 2023 Superformula. Was he? He was. Christ alive.
I had to go somewhere. It wasn't back to F2.
Very true. So he decided to race against Liam Lawson and I think Jean Lacey's grandson. No, son. Christ. Jean Lacey's son, Giuliano Lacey.
Sly old dog.
The kid's 24. How old was Jean Lacey? 59? Just about heads up. Anyway, back to what you were saying.
Oh yeah, Baku, just for that turn one, corner one chaos that most drivers suddenly forgot how to take a corner that they've been doing all weekend long. And it just showed, again, you can get the really brilliant racing, you can get the really not at all racing because you've all crashed side of things. And it separates the men from the boys a bit in that instance. So yeah, it just kind of gives you a bit of everything, perfect blend. So Baku for the win, which was nice because we needed Baku to at least be good for the feeder series, and it has never yet disappointed.
Yeah, it was. I think I think we both picked races that were a bit chaotic and led to something interesting. I think I'm remembering with the Dutch Grand Prix weekend, we had no points handed out for the sprint because they didn't really cover any distance.
Yes.
And then obviously the feature we came away.
Hang on a minute. Which race did Novalek win?
He won the feature race.
Yeah. Okay. I was hoping for a second there that it would have been so typical of him to win a race and then not get any points for it.
No. He started 13th and led the race having not made a pit stop. Entered the pit lane just as the safety car went out, and then came out having retained the lead. Vesti then lost both of his rear tyres. Earlier on in the race, I think Pourchaire had crashed, or I believe Pourchaire might have crashed.
Yeah, Pourchaire didn't make it very far.
Yes, he crashed out shortly after his pit stop in the rain. Just checking my notes, so I go back through. And then, of course, there was sort of a variety of different sort of means of collisions and chaos. Behrman was out. Martin's got himself a penalty. And in the end, it was Porsche. It was Novalek's win, but the result was Pourchaire retained a 12-point lead over Vesti, essentially kicking the can for the two at the top down the road for yet another weekend. So it just sort of amped up the pressure on Italy and Yas Marina. So it was a good weekend in that regard with regards to the rest of the season. Not necessarily great for high quality Formula 2 racing.
What we did have was high quality Formula 3 racing all season long, despite the fact that in the championship battle it was Bortoleto really.
It was high quality.
Ran away with it.
High quality Formula 3 racing from Gabriele Bortoleto, yes.
2 wins to his name and 164 points notched up compared to O'Sullivan's 119 P2. He only had 3 non-point scoring results all year, only 1 DNF. So again, like Pourchaire, like Verstappen, that consistency of just finishing a lot of the time really did help. We only had 10 different race winners here, which is still 7 more than we have in Formula 1. Bortoleto, O'Sullivan, Aaron, Colapinto, Marti, Mini, Goth, Collette, Barnard, amusingly, because I couldn't remember that one until that was there, but all good credit to him, and Edgar. 10 out of the 35 drivers competing didn't score any points, with 3 of those racing all season long. Tommy Smith, Oliver Gray, and Roberto Faria for VAR, Rodin, and PHM, respectively. It's as much as we were saying we hope consistency next year in drivers returning, I'm not sure that we'll lose much sleep if those 3 in particular don't make their way back. Although I know that I probably would not necessarily be much better, but at the same time, I haven't done this all my life. So that's what I'm going to say there. Sophia Flörsch scored 6 points this year, although I'm still annoyed about that one race that we don't talk about. And that is relevant, though, because that means she scored all of the points that PHM notched up in Formula 3 in 2023, and is more than all 3 drivers that raced for PHM and F2 were able to score combined all year, because as we pointed out earlier, they got the sum square root of sod all in terms of points. So just more mad respect for her there.
Yeah, it didn't do too badly there. I think she was sort of highest scoring out of all the drivers for PHM. She outscored on her own the entirety of Rodin Carlin as well. So, pretty good going there. I don't think either of those 2 outfits were really on form this year. And beyond...
It also goes to show that the 30-car grid, you don't always see everything going on, and you can make up a lot of places there and not be rewarded for it, which we know she got near the points on a number of occasions, but was just run out of laps or for whatever reason, or it was a sprint race where you would normally get points, but then typically don't because you're just still slightly away from it. So it was a shame, and I think it's a step in the right direction and is proof that she does deserve, at the very least, to stay there, if not make it to Formula 2, because, as I've said many a time, when you've got that kind of elite performance from your F2 team, you've really got nothing to lose from putting her in the F2 team with PHM, because worst case scenario, she doesn't score any points, and you as a team can say, well, she did very well for us in Formula 3. We thought we'd take a chance. PR and the marketing looks brilliant because you've got a woman there at a time where it looks great for that side of things, if nothing else. And if she does score you points, well, damn, she scored you points. If she scores 1 point, she's already outperformed you for the entire of the previous season with three drivers that you had. So I really don't. If she's not there in that team, and this isn't saying that she can't go to another team, because I'll happily take another team snapping her up. But if they don't put her in there for next year and find a way to make it work, goddamn people, goddamn.
Yeah, I think she could be a missed opportunity if she is glossed over on the driver market in between seasons here. She's proven she's got the talent and the ability to do it and pull it out of the bag. And like you said, on a 30-car grid, you can make 20 overtakes in a race and essentially not score a point. So you can make a huge amount of ground up and still fail
and
to
I think it
earn
was
any points.
Spa, wasn't it? Where was the unspoken race where she pretty much did just that.
Red Bull Ring.
Red Bull Ring. Okay, Spa was where it happened, but yeah, Red Bull Ring. She did, I'm pretty sure, a similar job there of just absolutely surviving in treacherous conditions and making her way just up and up and up. And you're like, oh, go on. And she did, and it stands by in my head the entire time. But we're not going to talk about that. Prema v Trident were the two main people in the Constructors' Championship, with Prema winning with 327 points to Trident's 308. Again, relatively close, considering the topsy-turvy nature of Formula 3. And
Mad how Trident had a better season in Formula 3 than they did in Formula 2.
Yeah, it's the fun thing with feeder series. It's, unless you're Prema, everything could be completely flipped from one category to the next, from year to year.
I mean, ARTGP came 8th in F3. They did pretty all right in F2, of course. And Rodin Carlin didn't do too badly in F2, but were bottom of the pile in F3. So, yeah, it's a weird little mix there.
That does lead me into driver of the season, and you can't copy mine. And I've gone for the obvious one, which is Bortoletto, because he was, as I said at the start of this, you kind of didn't even realize he was there, and he's suddenly out in front by country mile. You're frantically Googling his name to figure out who the hell he is and how he's managed to do this. And just very impressive. He's now part of the McLaren driver program. He's in Formula 2 for next year, and he's a happy chappy.
Yeah, I can't argue with that one, and I'm annoyed you picked it because, he had an absolutely stellar season and, came out of nowhere, dominated, and sort of said little more to it, and credit to him for it. I sort of would go for Zach O'Sullivan, who had a decent season, 119 points, but I'm going to go Paul Aron, actually, who did a bit of a Bortoletto, came from not sort of outside of F3. Zach O'Sullivan was in his second season. And Paul Aron came in first season, P3 overall, really good performance, 1 win to his name, a couple of podiums scattered in there as well. Decent points record across the year, 112 points by their seasons, and 7 points off of a chap who'd already done it the year prior. So, for me, Paul Aron, no questions asked.
Fair enough. I'm going to keep it with you, though, and say, or ask you rather, what was your underrated moment or driver of the season?
Ooh, underrated driver of the season.
So I feel like there could be a lot of those for the reasons we were saying about just now, in terms of you can overtake 20 cars and still be absolutely nowhere somehow. So there's a lot of potential here.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of moments where things went a bit awry for people. For me, checks notes. Yeah, I'm going to go for it, actually. Sprint race at Silverstone. Watched it in person. Obviously, Ollie Goethe won it. Pretty nice. But for me, it was Sebastian Montoya, who had a really, really heavy-going sprint race in Silverstone. Was fighting his way up the grid. It was changing conditions, made a pit stop, made the change for tyres, and made it work, I think, if I'm remembering his strategy correctly. It was brilliant, and he was really racing. He had a fairly tidy little season, a bit of a mixture of points and retirements here and there. If he get it a bit more consistent going into 2024, he could be a good little fighter. And he for me is my sort of underrated hero of the season.
That's fair. I was going to say it's nice when you can pinpoint a particular moment from the season like that with a specific driver to come with it. It's not necessarily a moment that involves multiple drivers all doing something together. It's not like Hungary in 2022, for example, where you've got a couple of people racing up through the grid. But when you've got that driver in that moment in that one flashy moment, which is not an obvious one, it's not a race win necessarily, then that's always fun as well. As for me, I'm going to once again sort of beating the Sophia Flörsch drum. And for all the reasons that I've already said, I'm just going to keep hammering the point home until PHM listen to me. And I think even if you don't put it up on the podcast's Instagram page as a clip, just trying to attract some attention from PHM and Flörsch, I want you to send that to me because I'm going to try and grab their attention and see if I can influence their Formula 2 choices for next year in some way, shape, or form whilst that seat is still open.
Okay, hear me out. Don't keep banging on the drum to PHM. Bang on the drum to a different and better team for Flörsch. How's that for a concept?
Like I said before, I'll happily have any other team take her as well. I just want to get the attention and keep it there.
I think she's worthy of a better team. There is a really good driver in there, and as much as I sort of questioned whether or not it made sense to keep sort of shining the spotlight on one driver, I think across the season, when you start to pick it apart, she's proven worth it.
And I also keep forgetting, which I think is something other people do forget as well, is that, yes, she seems to have been around for a long time in some respect. And everyone else these days is so focused on finding Max Verstappen that they're all finding younger and younger and younger people. She's only 23. She's only just turned 23. So she's still very fresh in the grand scheme of things as a racing driver in her career. And when you think about the crash that she had in Macau, the recovery she had to do from that, the endurance racing she's done, the Formula 3 season she did before, to then go off and do a few other bits, to then come back. And she's done all of that. She's only 23. Does make you and I feel like we may have not done quite as much with our time in some respects.
Yeah, please stop pointing out that I'm old and haven't achieved any racing success.
In terms of racing success, though, what was your round of the season?
That's a good question.
Because do feel free to take one of mine, because I'm not now convinced I'm going to choose either of them, if that helps.
Ooh. So we're going to go for Australia or Silverstone. I didn't watch Australia. It was a little too early in the morning for my palate.
I did the opposite of that, and I got naps in between little bits and pieces on everything over that entire weekend and just went for it.
Silverstone, however, I did watch it and I did enjoy it. I do recall watching the feature race for it as well on the Sunday and it being quite good. So I might steal your Silverstone argument there, actually. It was...
It's Silverstone. It never disappoints, does it?
It's great when it comes to F2 and F3. It's still pretty decent when it comes to F1, but F2 and F3 really jump out to me. I enjoyed watching F3 at Monza last year, so 2022. It was fantastic watching it there. Same with F2. But yeah, for me this year, Silverstone is the one that sticks in my mind. So I'm glad you brought it up and sort of put it on the page for me. It's the one I'm going to go for. Which way are you going to go then? If you're not going Australia and you're not going Silverstone?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still tempted for Australia, but it would have been Austria just because that was so entertaining. It's the same kind of logic that I've got for wishing I could rate Austin higher in Formula One. It was the after race impacts that ruined that as an overall Grand Prix in the same way that it happened in Austria. So I think to keep it consistent throughout my Formula 3 stuff before we move on to F1 Academy, I'll go for Spa because whilst I wasn't able to watch all of it live because I was in Paul Ricard at the time watching real life racing and trying to keep an eye on how at one point do I dash out the door to rush up to the roof so I can watch this actual racing happening here, which is why I'm actually here. It was annoying that all the races then Sophia Flörsch had to do really well there. So like, could you not have just done this at Monza or literally any other place where I'm not having to run around all the time? But Spa for that, because it was entertaining, not just for her, but for the other stuff going on there as a sprint race and a feature race weekend. And it's Spa. It's nice that Spa delivered because we've had a bit of a dullish time Formula One wise lately with it. So it's nice that feeder series again prove it's not necessarily the track, it's the racing and the categories that make it.
It's the racing and often the cars. I think we certainly see that with the likes of sort of Monaco and stuff, the fact that it can provide good racing with the feeder series, but struggles with F1. And I think we had a pretty decent time of it in F2 this year. But yeah. Anyway, that sort of rounds out Formula 3. You're likely going to be leading this third element a little more because you've certainly seen more of it than I have, and it's F1 Academy.
I have indeed. And it was a three-way battle for the title, as we alluded to earlier, between Neria Marti, Inabula, and Hamda Al Qubaisi, with Marta securing the win in the end. And rightly so. I mean, not that the other two were not deserving, but Marta Garcia, you had to go for it with her, really. And we had 9 different race winners in 2023. Obviously, Marta Garcia, Mina Bula, and Hamda Al Qubaisi, but also Neria Marti, Amara Qubaisi, Bianca Bustamante, Jessica Edgar, brilliant win at the end of the year. That Anita Hoyce and Carrie Schreiner, which, like we were also saying, you kind of could forget about that one pretty easily because it was so early in the season. Obviously, we weren't able to watch it properly, and considering where she finished in the championship, you kind of like you won a race. I mean, nice, but when, how, what? And it's the only championship out of I think all of them because I don't think Logan Sargent scored points this year, or did he? Did he manage to get
Logan Sargent scored 1 point this year
Damn.
in
Okay,
Kota
one of my
after
statistics there.
After
all of that.
qualifications. Yeah.
Yes. So I was going to say this was the only championship where all of the drivers scored points, but Logan, damn. But it's all right. It's the only feeder series where all of the drivers competing in it scored points. And it was Prema v MP Motorsport for the title, with Prema winning with a very narrow margin in the end, 419 points to 411. So that was nice for that to go down to the wire as well. And especially when you could see Bianca's race in particular at Austin not unfolding the way she might have wanted that to, and it being a little bit more in the balance than the other two categories had with their constructors championships.
I think Bianca's race, certainly in Kota, was it didn't help her fight against Amna Al Qubaisi either, because it kept her sort of in the end gave Amna that domination, well, not domination, that win over her. It was a 6 over 7th in the end, 117 points, plays 116. But yeah, it was a season of tit for tat in many of the battles between the drivers. But I think at the end of the day, it's sort of one driver shone through. But even when you look at the constructors, obviously we said there's a fight between Prema and MP, but equally Ronan Khan and ART Grand Prix had a good little battle going between them, only 8 points separating them. So 8 points between the top two, 8 points between 3 and 4. It's a fun little championship to keep an eye on.
Definitely. And does make the choice for driver of the season that bit trickier because everyone had a moment.
Yes, I think you've picked Bianca Bustamante. I think her moment was, of course, that win at Monza, and a very good
It wasn't
win.
even necessarily for the win at Monza for me that did it. It was just the fact that, well, she's obviously a good driver and will hopefully keep proving that to be the case next year. I think it's just been the way she's been able to marry everything together on and off track. It's just been so darn impressive, where I think these days, rightly or wrongly, if you can nail stuff off track really, really well, you can buy yourself more time than you would potentially otherwise. So whilst talent is obviously important, and she does have this, and it's not saying that she's undeserving of a seat on the grid or the partnership with McLaren, because she definitely deserves that. It's because of that combination between the two, whereas she's a good driver, and in order to be great, she needs to be able to stay around for maybe longer than other drivers would need to, because they've just got that more rawness to them on the talent side of things. And to be able to play the game so masterfully off track, where everyone else in F1 Canada is looking at going, how has she managed to do that? So she's played a blinder there. She's really gamed the system in a very smart way there, and the influence that she's had around the world. I mean, you look as well at what she was able to do for the Macau Grand Prix and the sponsorship there. She brought a makeup company into motorsport for the first time, which is just mental, and opens up so many potential avenues for women in motorsport there that you gotta take your hat off and go, very well played there. And also, you're not too bad in the car either, old girl.
Yeah, she's had a fairly decent racing season. Oh, Christ, I forgot she won in Spain as well. So 2 wins and a couple of podiums to boot. So not a bad racing season. But like you said, for Bianca Bustamante, I think the impressive thing for her is, like you said, it's what she's achieved off track, and the differences she's made, the publicity she's brought to it as a sport, the fact that she has been this
She's in
very
Google's video for the year.
Yes, yeah, I saw this. She's such a brilliant, open, sort of shining example of what women in motorsport can be, and the fact that you can combine that sort of level of femininity, like you said, bringing in a makeup product as a sponsor for your car, and you can combine those two things and prove that motorsport can be for the girls, and it can be for the most stereotypical of girls, or it can be for the most petrol-headed of
You
girls.
can like make up, you can want to put it on underneath the helmet and everything, and she can still go out and absolutely boss it. Why not?
Yeah, she has been more than a good driver. She has been a fantastic role model. I think that is more so, or just as important as the driving and what she's achieved in the season this year. So yeah, I think she's certainly a good pick from you. And in sort of whole reflection, I'm annoyed you've chosen her now, because you
Is
sort
this
of
because you're going to revert to type and go back for the champion?
Well, partly yes, but also because now it just sounds quite hollow, because you've picked someone that's sort of quite wholesome and has a sort of greater picture beyond the sport, which is something I really like. And I think the fact that she stands for more than just racing is very much just sort of akin to the way we look at Lewis Hamilton as a fantastic racing driver, but someone who stands for more than just the sport. And that's why I genuinely do like Lewis Hamilton and what he's able to achieve beyond F1. And we're seeing the start of that with Bianca Bustamante, and it's annoying because I can't pick anything else now without seeming like a bit of a cold and heartless bastard. Damn you.
But you're going to have to.
I'm going to have to. And for me, it's got to be Marta Garcia. I mean, you look at the second half of her season, everything from, say, the second round of Zandvoort onwards, just phenomenal. I mean, the first half of it wasn't bad either, but the fact that you then go on, you have that triplet of wins, double at Le Castellet, and then winning the first round at Cota, and then coming back with a P3 in the third round. It was a bit of a jumbled set of races at Cota for W Series, all over the shop with grids and podiums, which we like to see. Good bit of racing, and it provides decent chance for a lot of other drivers on the field. But for Marta Garcia to sort of get that win, retirement, and then P3 really just sort of puts that nail into the coffin as to just how sort of encapsulating she's been this season. Like over 50 points clear of the next driver in the field. It's good going. You can't deny it.
No, not at all. Not at all.
She's drove in a different class this year, and I think that is worth mentioning. And it'll be really interesting to see what she's able to do in Freca next year. I don't know.
I'm going to keep you reading Grimes, your most underrated. But I'm going to go for someone who, yes, not for reasons that are going to be clear in a second, I am quite biased here, but that doesn't mean my argument isn't solid. In Maite Cáceres, who, again, like I was saying when we were talking about the news section for F1 Academy towards the start of the podcast, it is such a tight field from first to last that you could be almost forgiven for missing out on a whole bunch of drivers just by seeing where they finish, rather than delving into the details a bit more and really looking at it because of how close the margins are in qualifying in the race. And also when you look at the cars, because it is the first season of a championship where they're still figuring all the things out. And in the same way that the sprint races work well at some tracks, but not so much at others, you've got to see what tracks work for which categories. And it's the same kind of argument I have with Formula, is that it works really well for endurance racing. I don't think it works as well for Formula One these days. So you've got all these kind of things into it. Whereas, so basically, when you're looking at a driver anywhere in F1 Academy, you can't just look at the result and go, yep, you're good, you must be bad because you're here. And it can be very difficult to have progress be seen in a way that isn't just points, podium, or a win. And that's why I've chosen Maite here, because when you look at from where she started to where she finished up, it can be quite easy to dismiss it, but you'd be a bit silly for doing so, because she was learning throughout there. She really pushed an envelope. In the second half of the season, she really came alive. And it was just really great to see. And it was quite fun to watch that in person in Paul Ricard, because you could see how slim the margins were, and you couldn't even fit like a sheet of paper in between the cars if you put the times out in that sort of a way there. And you've just got to love how close the racing is, how close the talent pool is there, and all of that kind of stuff there. So I think that it's very easy to overlook a handful of the drivers there, but I'm going to go and not just because I'm very biased for obvious reasons.
Yeah, for quite obvious reasons. For me, underrated driver, it's going to be odd, but I'm going to go for Jess Edgar, actually.
Not that odd.
It's not that odd, actually. I was about to say Hamza Al-Khabaisi, but then I figured actually Jess Edgar really was quite underrated this season. Really, really competitive, win to a name, couple of podiums, a really good consistency. It's, really, really consistent, actually. Only 2 points off of Bianca Bustamante, who we're regarding as having had a really good season. So to sort of fall just behind that by 2 points really suggests that you're quite hot on it. And I can't remember if she's
underrated in the same way that like Bashir was. It's kind of like you're there, but no one seems to spot you.
Yeah, we just seem to sort of forget about you constantly. Interestingly, cousin of Johnny Edgar. Didn't know that.
Yes, you did.
No, I didn't. I literally just found that out by opening up her Wikipedia page, actually. And
because I've heard you say this multiple times on the podcast before.
Okay, well, I'm going to the doctor and getting myself checked for dementia. But it'd be interesting to see what she gets up to next year, because she hasn't been confirmed yet for F1 Academy in 2024. But it'd be nice to see a team pick her up and give her a bit of backing. I don't know which one would go for her as such. It'd be quite interesting.
I tried predicting all of this stuff, and it's already gone out the window, and we've only had 3 drivers get announced, so I'm not even going to touch that one.
Oh, so obviously we've already got one. I mean, teams can pick more than one. So it'd be nice, British driver, nice to see Williams hop on.
Yeah, but I don't think they are going to.
No. Red Bull haven't got anyone.
Not yet.
Female in their junior driver academies. So Jess Edgar would make sense. Milton Keynes, it's in the UK. I'm going to go down that route. I would like to see
solid logic.
According to what you've said already, it's sound logic given how it's panned out. But she's had a great season. I think it'd be great to see her come back with a bit more backing, a bit more support, and really give her that push to achieve the next step of performance and see where that gets to. So I think there's another level of Jess Edgar to be unlocked here. The same as we've sort of said there is for Bianca Bustamante. I think Edgar has that similar approach needed of just sort of someone to go, right, here's what we're going to do, and you're going to be fantastic. And I think we could see that in 2024. I hope we do.
I hope we do as well, because like I was saying, there is just such a plethora of talent that we've seen this year that even if a few of them don't come back, it'd be a shame for a lot of them not to come back, because you just like to see with a few people like her and like Bianca, like we were saying, where when you're somehow that close in the standings at the end, you want to see what that looks like now that you've got the momentum behind you of a full season, to see how that would transfer into a second full season and see what you could do with that, especially with the right kind of backing behind you from an F1 team.
Yeah, I mean, she had a pretty decent span of it, especially look at the second half of her calendar. Like Monza, points in all 3 races. Cota, points in all 3 races off the back of scoring points in 2/3 of the races at Le Castellet as well. Like, it's really good consistency and opening up the year with that 3rd place as well. Garcia, Bustamante, Edgar on the podium at the Red Bull Ring. That's really putting your name up there, that like saying, look, I can be racing up here with the foremost of the grid, and sort of going, yeah, and then pretty much sticking with that for the rest of the season it's what we like to see. So there we go. I keep joking that I'm not a betting man, but if I could find somewhere on Sky Bet that allows me to put money on Jess Edgar for the F1 Academy season in 24, I might put a quid on.
There must be a make your own bet feature somewhere, or is that just too dangerous for gambling people to have these days?
And that's probably too dangerous a thing. I think you'd have to go to like a bookmakers and ask for that to be specially made up. But yeah, we'll see what happens.
Fair, visually and stylistically, you're old enough to do that, so I think you could get away with that.
I can get away with that. I think what the hell's James May doing betting on F1 Academy? But
geez, he's really gone downhill since the Grand Tour. Anyway, round of the season. It was only really one choice for me. That's mainly because I actually got to watch a full race weekend live, and not just on the TV. Well, I actually got to do it twice because we got to see Cota live on the TV, didn't we? But I didn't want to have to wait until then, so I went to France, which is weird because it's easier. It was literally easier to, as we've said with Valencia, it was easier to just fly to whichever country it was in and watch it in person by whichever method you could get to. In Valencia, it's buying a ticket for whatever festival was on.
It was Euro NASCAR.
Euro NASCAR.
20 euros got you in.
Yeah, so if it's buying a ticket for Euro NASCAR of all things, or if it's for working for one of the drivers, it's easier to do that than it was to watch it on TV in your own home. Luckily, corrected for next year, but it was just very nice to be able to do that, and the racing was sublime. The noise of the engines first thing on Saturday morning. It's like when you actually get the chance to go to any kind of motorsport events. It's obviously going to be your favorite one rather than the ones you see on the TV because you were there.
Yeah, I think for me, by proxy, my sort of only real argument is going to have to be COTA because it was the only one that actually saw anything happen on.
Yeah.
But it was getting to watch it and getting to see that happen was great, and it proved there was good racing. But equally, there's a bit of me that now, on reflection, is annoyed that it's sort of joining up with F1 weekends because the idea that you could sort of get a day return flight to Spain, pay 20 euros to watch the racing, and that it was actually strangely accessible.
Yeah.
So even if you were sort of if you lived in Spain or France or Netherlands or Italy, you could
even
go
they had a stand open that overlooked the final turn and the start finish straight, and there were people in there. So there is a way to get in.
So you could very reasonably go along and watch this racing and enjoy it in person. So it's not like it wasn't accessible, and it wasn't like these role models weren't on display. It was 20 euros to go and see it, but I mean, there was other racing on most of those days. Like on some of the Spanish weekends, it was part of a sort of major racing weekend. They were often as a sort of warm-up act to other races. So there was accessibility to it, and it's almost annoying.
Monza, I think, had the World Endurance Championship or the European Le Mans Series the same weekend. So if you got in for one, you probably stick around for the lot of it.
Yeah, you don't sort of turf you out. They say, "Were you here to just watch F1 Academy?" Yeah, out you go, sunshine. You can't watch Elms, but it's. Yeah, the fact that it's now been made, if anything, slightly less accessible in person. Like it's now going to be extortionate to go along to a race weekend and watch F1 Academy in person. So it's almost lost that humble nature that a feeder series needs. Like it costs hundreds of pounds to go along and watch on a Saturday at Silverstone. Like all of a sudden it's no longer sort of a £40 proposal to go and watch some racing, and that close-upness to important role models for women within racing and sports and science has been taken away. So almost a negative in that regard.
We can't leave it like that, though. We've got to have some kind of positive note to end this podcast on.
We'll find a positive note. Quick. We're getting to the conclusion. We're over 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. That's a positive note.
That is a positive note. We'll take that, and hopefully stuff starts happening. Apparently over 1,000 stuff starts happening, so...
No, it doesn't. Well, we need to get a lot more people watching and listening to videos. So remember to like, comment, subscribe, and obviously
1,000 subscribers doesn't hurt. And it's meant to be the start of stuff happening.
Yeah. So it's the beginning of good stuff.
There we go. We sold something. But yeah. There we go. That's all we've got time for in this week's episode. Join us again soon when we should have some more excellent F1 and feeder series content for you. So make sure you've liked, subscribed, and got your notifications turned on so you don't miss a darn thing. Jesse, where can people find you in the meantime, though?
In the meantime, you can find me on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. I'm on all of those. Oh, and Twitter. I've got a TikTok that'll be coming out tomorrow, hopefully. I've got YouTube videos, which are starting to reappear, and I'm on Instagram all the time. And if you want me in written format, you can find me in Classic Car Weekly. The day we're recording this, our Christmas bumper issue has just gone on sale. So you can read about all the good things Classic Car from 2023 and get excited for 2024. Plus, there's like 5 bonus crosswords in there if you like crosswords about classic cars.
As for myself, you can find me over on Is It Fast on the Curves on Pourchaire, the Nitro RX podcast, Paddock Sorority, and of course Instagram, where there's still quite a bit of stuff to come, even though we're midway through December and are determined to get a few more bits out before the end of the year just to round things off in a busy and productive way that way. Anyway, thank you very much for listening, and we will be back soon.